Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. We've got a pretty good cold front blowing through Wisconsin right now. We're going to have highs for the next several days are going to be upper 50s or barely touching 60 degrees with lows in the mid 30s. It's early September right now, but fall is starting to move in. We're starting to see some trees changing color already. And really what that means is you're going to have a lot of fish that are transitioning, but more than anything, we've got falling water temperatures. And falling water temperatures can lead to some pretty difficult fishing. It's going to be moving fish around quite a bit to begin with, but generally speaking, for the first couple days of that cold front, the fish are probably not going to be very active. So, having said that, I thought I would do a video with you to share some of my favorite ways to try to combat that and increase the number of fish that you're going to catch while you've got tough fishing conditions of falling water. So before I share those with you though, I do want to remind you, I do have a members only page. So if you're looking for more content from me, I do additional monthly videos, a monthly live stream. You can have direct access with me. So if that's something you're looking for, more content from me, check out my members only page. You can go to my homepage on YouTube, click the join button, find out everything you need to find out there. Also, if you're looking to support the channel and you need to purchase some fishing tackle and you use Tackle Warehouse, please use my Tackle Warehouse affiliate link. I'll put that in the video description for you. You can bookmark it for future purchases as well. It's very, very much appreciated. Everything I make from that goes right back into making content for you guys. So hopefully it's a win-win for everybody. All right, so falling water temperatures. I'm willing to bet here in Wisconsin, we're going to have a temperature drop of close to 10 degrees between now and probably the next 3 days. And that's going to have the fish doing quite a bit of things. But really, in the first couple days, they're going to be pretty lethargic. You know, fish are cold-blooded creatures, and from that standpoint, their activity level tends to drop with the water level as it drops, meaning they don't need to eat as much in colder water temperatures, so they don't just feed as much and they're harder to catch from that standpoint. Now, I will say, generally speaking, your fall period is some of your best fishing because the fish are starting to feed up before the winter months. They put on a bunch of weight, but we're not quite there yet. Right now, this is strictly a cold front. It's kind of a tease that the fish are going to get moving into the fall period. It would not surprise me if we still have some pretty warm weather over the next couple of weeks. But right now, we've got a pretty good cold front going through. And from that standpoint, there are several things that I like to do to try to increase my odds. Now, there's really no particular order to these, but the first one has to do with trying to fish the bottom, trying to stay closer to the bottom versus fishing top water baits or fishing for fish that are suspended. Generally speaking, I feel like anytime you've got a cold front that goes through, you have pretty good pressure changes and you have drastic water temperature change at the surface, but that water temperature change is not nearly as prevalent the deeper you go, meaning the deeper water tends to stay much more even in temperature. And from that standpoint, if you had fish that were, say, in a shallow bay and you had a 10-degree water temperature, those fish are probably going to be more lethargic or potentially move out of that area to go find deeper water, which may have only dropped 2 degrees. And therefore, those fish really are not taking on the same effect of that water temperature change. So from that standpoint, I tend to like to fish the bottom. You know, I tend to like to fish a little deeper if I can, but generally speaking, the bottom is going to be where you have more stable water. And it's not necessarily deeper. When I say deeper, it's relevant to the area. So if you've got a big, giant, flat, you know, where you had a bunch of fish in the back of the flat, maybe they'll go find a 5-foot hole that's on a 2-foot flat. They'll just generally gravitate to a little bit deeper water. And I tend to want to fish the bottom because those fish are generally relating to something on the bottom. It's very important to try to identify those areas that the fish are holding to, which is another thing I love to do, which is fish tight to cover. Just like in the springtime period and the winter period, if you've got falling water temperatures, the fish want to gravitate towards heat. Well, you've got to look for those objects that grab sunlight and retain heat. So generally speaking, in the fall, they're a little bit different than maybe what you find in the spring. Obviously, you still have your rock and your wood that's going to grab sunlight and produce heat. But one of my favorite places is to fish really thick submerging grass. In the North Country here, we get a lot of milfoil. You can find some hydrilla in places. But your thicker vegetation will create almost like an insulated patch of warm water. And you can experience this if you like to, swim in the summer months. You can swim through some thick grass cover, and what you'll actually find is a lot of times in your hottest period, you'll have really warm water around the grass. But then if you were to like go into the grass, you'll feel that water temperature cool, and it's because that grass is actually acting as an insulator, and it's blocking the sunlight. It's like being in the shade under a tree. Well, the same holds true when you have falling water temperature. If that water in that grass patch is 70 degrees and then you have a drastic cold front, you might have the water around that grass patch drop 10 degrees, but the water inside the grass patch is only 5 degrees drop. So I personally like to fish really thick, heavy grass cover because I do believe that it retains heat a little bit better, and it gives the fish something to move into, and they just like to be around that thick cover. So in the fall, when I have falling water temps, if I can find good, healthy green grass, that's what I'm going to be looking for first, along with your hard targets like wood and rock. But, and that only holds up for so long because eventually the grass dies off, and that's no longer an option for you. But I definitely always try to fish tighter to cover. The fish will get right up tight to the cover to try to get that heat from those objects. Definitely something you want to pay attention to. Another thing that I really like to do is fish baits that I can retrieve at a slower pace, but impart action that creates reactionary bites from the fish. That was a mouthful, but what I mean by that is, I like to fish slower moving baits. So let's say I'm fishing a football jig, or I'm dragging a jig. I've got it down in the bottom. I'm fishing maybe a rock vein, and I'm fishing it slow. Well, if I'm not getting bit just by a slow drag, I'm going to impart a quick hop in the rod. I'm going to make that bait explode off the bottom and then fall quick back to the bottom after it hits its pinnacle in that height and moves down. And what that's going to do is it creates that opportunity to get a reaction strike out of the fish. So if I had a fish that was following it and they're just not in an active mood because of the water temp change, the cold front that's come in, I'll snap the rod, get that bait to fly up, and hopefully trigger that fish into biting. So I'll do that with pretty much any baits that I'm using. I'm not really limiting myself to baits. I don't necessarily want just a slow moving bait, but I'm going to fish everything slower. So if I'm fishing a lipless crankbait or a vibrating jig, two of my favorite fall baits, I'm going to be retrieving it slower, but I'm still going to really give some good snaps in the rod tip to create that reaction strike versus just burning the bait kind of back to the boat. So you can do it with everything. You just got to recognize that you want to slow down your overall retrieve, but still have reactionary movements in your rod and in your retrieve to generate reaction strikes. Definitely something to keep in mind and very important. And then the last true key to fishing during cold front conditions, and this holds true for your entire cold water periods, try to concentrate on the second half of the day. The fishing is almost always better in the second half of the day. At that point, the sun has been up for a while. It's heated up some objects. The water temperature is usually going to be at its warmest point for that day. And the fish just tend to be more active. So if you had to choose between fishing in the morning or the afternoon, your bite's almost always going to be better in the afternoon on your cold front days during a cooler water period. So keep that in mind. Be a little bit more selective in terms of when you go out. But if you happen to run into conditions like we have here and we're going to have for the next several days, these are some little tips that I think will help you catch more fish because I know they work for me. So hopefully this was helpful. If it was, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Stay tuned. We'll have a new video coming out tomorrow.